Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at a RealSteel. Now you may say, Kevin, I think we've seen this knife before, and maybe you have, but this is the most current iteration of the RealSteel Megalodon. I can now say that I've had every version of this knife on my channel. Initially, when this knife came out, it came out in titanium and M390 steel with a flat grind. It was a beautiful, beautiful, fantastic knife, and still is, by the way. So if you want to get one, I still highly recommend that knife, even with the change from roller bearings to standard ball bearings. I wish they would have kept the roller bearings. Anyway, this knife has since that time, though, come out in a G10 liner lock version, which is also great. It's come out in the Eclipse version, which was carbon fiber and titanium. And now there is this most recent version, which is essentially the Eclipse in slightly more budget-friendly materials. Okay, so this is like a budget version of the Megalodon Eclipse. And it has a lot of the same things that the Megalodon has typically had. It's got this great lock bar stabilizer done with a cutout, so it's like an integral lock bar stabilizer, which is nice. It's got this recurved blade that's very long, very slim. This particular one is N690 steel. Over here we have a laminated carbon fiber, which is very, very nice, and it does balance out the knife a little bit and bring the weight down a bit. So yeah, it has a lot of the things that I've liked in the past about the Megalodon, with some cheaper materials to come in at a better price point. And really, I think this is an effort to come in at that sort of, you know, $50 to $100 price point. I think these guys land about $100, which I think when we talk about, you know, the materials and the construction and stuff, I think you'll see that that's actually a reasonable value. So let's start off though with size and weight. 8 3/4 overall. So this is a pretty large knife. 3 7/8 on the blade length, 4 7/8 on the handle length, and 5.1 ounces. Now 5.1 ounces is pretty hefty for this knife, and that's because this is a stainless steel frame lock rather than a titanium frame lock. And you can see there's no milling of any kind inside there. Honestly, when you pick the knife up, it doesn't feel that heavy. So I'm not really going to complain about the fact that it's 5 ounces. It's nearly 9 inches long. So, you know, not a huge problem. Let's go ahead, though, and start talking about the various specifics here, beginning with the blade. So up front, we have this N690 blade with a stonewash finish. We've got a recurve here, sort of a saber style grind, which does carry, hold on, fair bit of material out to the tip there. I want to make sure you can see that. All right, got this nice swedge on top. And the blade here is definitely a departure from the original. And one of the things I absolutely adored about the original was that full flat grind on the blade and that beautiful satin finish, which this is lacking. But you could argue, and I mentioned this in the first impressions, that perhaps this blade matches the design of the handle a little bit better. In terms of performance, N690 steel is a very nice steel. You know, and at the price point here for $100, I think it's totally suited to the knife. So essentially what you're paying for with this is that steel and the degree of fit and finish that you're getting, okay, which is good. All right, so compared to the liner lock version, okay, you're getting an upgraded steel, which I understand. And on the other extreme, compared to the higher end version, you're getting a downgraded steel and you're saving yourself about $100. So you know, that's kind of how this whole thing plays out. Moving on to lockup and deployment, it is a stainless steel liner lock. It's on normal ball bearings as opposed to roller bearings, but the action is very nice on this. Really, really dialed in on the detent there. And, you know, depending on how you like your knives, you could play around with this, but I like a knife that drops shut with a little bit of shaking. I don't want it to just be a complete guillotine. And so this one to me is really, really well done. And it's very smooth. And again, like I've said with all of these knives, whether it be the, you know, I think there was like a $50 one that was in G10, all the way up to the $200 one, the action is way beyond what you would expect for the price point. And that's carried over to this model as well. All right, so if you're looking for that, and that's where this knife, I would say, really shines. If you're looking to experience, you know, the action of a $300 or $400 knife, but you only want to spend $100, this is a great way to do that, to kind of get that just outstanding experience that you would normally pay a lot of money for, but get it in a package that is pretty affordable. Or perhaps you have one of the models of that's one of the higher end models, but you don't want to carry it that much because it's expensive. This might give you, again, an alternative where you can carry a similar knife that you're not quite as worried about breaking or losing or whatever the case may be. Yeah, so lockup and deployment, very good. Everything's easy. It deploys well. Really nice little flipper tab here that's really perfectly done. It's comfortable. It grips your finger just enough. And again, so we've got to give credit for that. The detent is really, really nice. And the lock bar, once again, is easy to access, and the tension is set really, really well. So in terms of performance there, it gets all of those things right. Moving on to handle construction, I will say this about the material choice. So every time I see this carbon fiber, you do see it from time to time on more expensive knives. It just feels cheap to me, okay? So I've got a couple of other examples. There's the Rat Model 1 in D2. Here is the RealSteel Ippon, and here is the Megalodon. They all have this same carbon fiber, and although it looks okay, it's not my favorite choice of carbon fiber. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. It's not ugly by any means, but I just don't find it looks, I don't know, it feels just a little bit cheap. Stainless steel frame lock is fine. Of course, the nice thing about stainless steel frame locks is stainless steel is a really tough, really durable material. So if you're going to go with a frame lock, titanium is of course preferred, but there are definitely some materials properties that stainless steel has that are going to be very nice when compared to titanium. Okay, so that's probably worth considering in terms of the toughness and the durability of it. Obviously, though, it's going to add some weight, which is something to consider, and that does put this up to 5 ounces. It is nice standoff construction, lanyard pin here, and that's something I'm on the fence about. I really don't care about it, but I like the way that they've given you the lanyard option without doing anything that sort of distracts from the design. Spring clip here works really, really well. The odd time, and it only happens, one in about every 10 times that I put this knife in my pocket, maybe even less, my pants will sort of catch on this little ridge right here. As I say, it doesn't happen every time. It doesn't even happen often, but it has happened a couple of times. And it may be that somebody out there watching has like the perfect pair of pants that will catch every time. Normally, it's not a deal, but I thought I better point it out just because it has happened to me a couple of times in use. Okay, so that's sort of my take on, construction is good. Ergonomics, I guess I really haven't commented on that, but you could really go back and look at my previous videos. Yeah, this knife is very, very comfortable in hand. No hot spots, really, really lends itself to a saber grip. Definitely a comfortable knife, easy to use, and I do like the fact that they've given me a little bit of a place for my thumb to land right there. Okay, so let's now finally get to some comparisons. Obviously, some of the ones I brought in a minute ago, the Rat Model 1 I brought in here more for the size comparison because people are very familiar with it, and because you're getting, these knives have a lot of similarity. Obviously, the steel is going to be better on the RealSteel, the action is better on the RealSteel, but fairly similar knives. Here is, of course, the Ippon, which I've recently reviewed and you're probably quite familiar with. A little more innovative. What else have we got here? Para 2. Bring this in for a couple of reasons. One, you're almost getting up to Para 2 level price point. Number 2, everyone is very familiar with the Para 2, so you're going to be able to kind of take a look and have some sense for what size this knife is. All right, another knife that I think everyone's familiar with is the Recon 1, and with sort of a larger, sort of tactical-ish knife, I feel like it's worthwhile bringing in at least a couple of cold steels, because if you just want a good EDC knife, obviously the action is not at all similar, but that may be a considerable or a knife to consider for you. Lastly, I want to bring in the Kaiser. This is the Kesmic, but a number of Kaisers could sort of fit this bill. All right, you can find a number of these Kaiser knives with the S35VN steel for around 110 bucks, 115 bucks, maybe 120. Obviously, not when they're new, but after a couple of years, they often get deeply discounted, and it's almost, okay, the action perhaps, especially on the higher end version of this knife, is a little more dialed in, but this action is very, very nice and very budget friendly. So that's one thing I wanted to point out there. So this is about $100. You can get something almost as good, or I mean, you can get something just that's quite a bit better in terms of materials and in terms of, and the action is as good for just a little bit more. And that's where I think this knife kind of falls down. This knife is going to have a hard time, I feel, competing at the price point. Now, if this was a $70 knife, I would just be, totally praising it and have nothing bad to say. But at $100, I think it's going to be really hard to justify this purchase, when for like $10 more, I could go up, I could step up to a full titanium frame lock. Okay, so that's where the one challenge comes in for me on this. Overall, I think RealSteel has done a good job. This is a really nice design. They've really, and they have taken full advantage of this nice design. It reminds me of sort of Kershaw or ZT when they have a design like the 0392 or the Natrix, where it's like, we're going to use this design everywhere in every way that we can. And RealSteel has kind of done this with the Megalodon design. And it's a great design. I get it. And this is definitely a good expression of it. There's a lot going for this knife. If you like a larger knife, if you like a very stylized knife, if you like a great action, if you like a knife that's comfortable in hand, that cuts well, hey, that's really, really nice. The really only detractor that this knife has is the price point. It's $100. And that's a little tough to justify in my mind. Okay, so there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. And perhaps these knives will come down in price a little bit. As I say, at $75, this would be a great value, and I'd be all over just recommending it. At $100, I think if you love the design, you won't be disappointed, but it's probably not going to be for everyone at that price point. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.